My son put his hands on me in my own kitchen, and I did not say a single word. But the next morning, when he came downstairs thinking his disrespect had gone unpunished, he froze in terror when he saw who was sitting at my dining room table. I was at the head of the table, smoothing out the lace tablecloth. When Michael walked in with that air of his, like he owned the world, he did not even notice the swelling on my lip. He was too focused on himself. He grabbed a biscuit, took a bite, and started talking about how things were going to change around this house. But the words got stuck in his throat when the chair next to me moved. His face, still red from the alcohol the night before, turned gray instantly, as if he had seen a ghost. The biscuit fell from his hand and crumbled onto the floor. In that second he understood that my silence the night before had not been fear but a sentence. But for you to understand how we got to that breakfast, that felt more like a courtroom, I have to introduce myself properly. My name is Arthur Sullivan. I'm 68 years old. I'm a widower, and I live in an old neighborhood in a southern port city, the kind with old houses with wide porches, wooden balconies, and huge oak trees shading the street. I have always been a quiet man. I raised my son alone after my wife Mary passed away. I worked whatever jobs were needed so that Michael never lacked anything. But until about 6 hours ago, I did not know I was sleeping with the enemy under my own roof. It all happened, or maybe it all finally broke, around 3 in the morning. Michael came home. I was in the kitchen, sitting in my rocking chair, listening to a hymn on the radio, very low to calm my nerves. Outside it was raining hard, but what startled me was the sound of the key scratching in the lock, clumsy and aggressive. He stumbled in, smelling of cheap bourbon and cigarettes. I stayed quiet. He threw his keys onto the hall table, and I heard something break. It was my blue ceramic vase, the one that had belonged to my grandmother. He did not even turn his head. He came into the kitchen, and when he saw me, his rage seemed to swell even more. He started shouting, saying everything was my fault, that his life was a mess, because I cared more about the house and my old junk than about him. I stood up slowly and told him, "Son, go to bed. You're not well." That was it. That sentence was the trigger. He came at me. A 41-year-old man, strong against his own father. He grabbed me by the arms and shook me so hard I felt my teeth rattle. Then he shoved me. I flew back against the china cabinet. The hard wood hit my back and my head smacked against the glass. And it did not end there. He raised his hand and slapped me across the face. The blow sounded dry. The pain was hot and immediate. I tasted iron in my mouth. My lips split open. I did not scream. I did not cry. I stayed there, curled in a ball on the floor, looking at him. And him? He snorted. He turned around and went up the stairs, leaving his father bleeding in the kitchen. The silence that remained in the house after was heavy thick, the kind of silence that stays when something breaks, and you know it cannot be fixed. I went to the small half-bath in the hallway. I looked at myself in the little mirror and washed my face with cold water. I saw the cut on my lip, the beginning of a bruise on my cheek. In that moment, looking myself in the eyes, I did not see a victim. I saw Arthur, the man who had survived too many things to put up with this. I decided right there that this would be the last time. I went back to the kitchen, cleaned up the blood, and instead of going to bed to cry, I started cooking. It was the only thing I could do to not lose my mind. I took out the flour, the butter, the yeast. I grabbed the new set of non-stick champagne-colored baking sheets my sister Sarah had sent me. She told me they were the best, that nothing sticks to them, and they were pretty and tough, too. I used them all night. While the world slept and my son snored upstairs, I baked dozens of biscuits on those trays. Every time I kneaded the dough, I thought about what I had to do. With every golden batch that came out of the oven, my plan became clearer. I was not going to fight with shouting. I was going to use the only language Michael had forgotten, respect and the law. I set the table as if it were Christmas. Lace tablecloth, the fine china fresh coffee, everything perfect. When the clock struck 7:30, I was ready. The smell of food drifted up the stairs like bait. I knew he would come down, and I knew he would think everything was fine because a father puts up with everything, right? What he did not know was that this time the endurance came accompanied by justice. Michael came down with his face swollen from the hangover and that usual arrogance. He saw the table set and gave a crooked smile. He thought he had won. But at 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang and his world started to crumble. The first batch of biscuits came out of the oven a little after 4 in the morning. The smell of butter spread through the kitchen, that smell that should mean home quiet Sunday's rest. But in that early morning it was the smell of my determination. I placed the hot tray on the rack, and the metal made a small ping in the silent house. My hands covered in flour looked like a ghost's hands. I moved with a calm that did not feel like mine, as if I had put on armor over the old man who had been on the floor hours before. While I prepared the second batch of dough, my eyes fell on something on the counter next to the sugar bowl. It was one of those modern digital frames with a black screen. Sarah gave it to me for Christmas. No more dusty albums, Arthur, she told me on the phone. I bought it online. It's beautiful. You load the photos and it plays one after another, so you remember the good times. And there it was, day and night, parading photos of my life. A loop of happy memories, a constant reminder of everything I had lost. Just when I looked at it, a photo appeared. It was Michael. He must have been about 8, standing in a fishing boat on the lake, his hair messed up by the wind, and a huge smile showing the gap where he was missing a tooth. He was holding the small fish with both hands like it was a giant trophy. Beside him was me, younger, holding the rod and laughing. And on the shore, Mary, his mother, was laying out the picnic blanket. That image hit me in the chest. I leaned against the counter, staining my shirt with flour. I closed my eyes, and I was no longer in my kitchen at 4 in the morning with a split lip. I was back in that summer of 1990 at Emerald Lake. I remembered the smell of sunscreen damp earth, Mary's laugh echoing over the water. Michael had spent the whole morning trying to catch something so patient, so stubborn. When he finally felt the tug on the line, his shout of joy scared the birds from the trees. "Dad, I got one, I got one," he squealed. I helped him reel it in, calm, showing him how to hold the fish. "Look at that Mary," I shouted from the boat. "I think we have a fisherman in the family." The pride in my voice was one of the most beautiful things I have ever heard in myself. And Michael looked at me as if I were a superhero, with an adoration, a respect, a love that seemed indestructible. At what moment was that child lost? At what curve in the road did we derail? The frame changed photos. Now it was Michael's high school graduation, him in his blue gown and diploma in hand. Me beside him, 30 years younger, smiling like my face was going to split. He was the first in the family to go to college. Our church, New Hope Baptist, organized a party for him. Sister Helen made his favorite carrot cake with cream cheese frosting. Pastor John said a prayer from the pulpit, calling him our young scholar, an example for all. I remember sitting in that pew and feeling my chest so swollen with pride, it almost hurt. Arthur Sullivan, Mary's husband. The sisters of the church murmured proud of my boy. Our Mary did not get to see him graduate from college. She died of a massive heart attack on the docks where she worked when Michael was in his senior year. She went to work in the morning, kissed me on the cheek, and never came back. Mary's death was an earthquake that shook the foundations of the house. But we survived. I stayed strong for Michael. At the wake, he squeezed my hand so hard he left nail marks. He did not cry in front of anyone. He stood firm, serious. That night, when everyone left, he hugged me in the kitchen and broke down crying on my shoulder. "Now I am going to take care of you. Dad," he told me, "I promise. I'm going to make Mom proud of me." And for a long time he did. He graduated with honors, got a good office job at the same port where his mother worked, bought a decent car, helped with expenses. On Sundays he took me to church, sat beside me in the pew, and sang the hymns with his deep voice. The old folks in the neighborhood looked at him and said, "Arthur, you did a good job." Mary would be proud of that boy. I lived off that pride. He was my son, my light. Seeing my son turned into a good, respected man was proof that all my sacrifices had been worth it. The image in the frame changed again. A more recent photo. A barbecue on the patio about 3 years ago for the city festival. Michael was at the grill wearing an apron that said King of the Grill. He was a bit heavier, but he looked happy. The neighbors were there, Judge, Linda, her husband who was still alive then. It looked like a perfect life straight out of a magazine, but happiness sometimes is just a photograph, a frozen instant. Because it was right after that barbecue when the cracks started to show. It all started at his job. Restructuring was the word they used. The port was modernizing, bringing in new people with new ideas. Michael's position, secure for almost 20 years, was suddenly optimized. They demoted him, sent him to a corner with far fewer responsibilities, and what is worse for him, much less respect. For Michael, it was not just losing a title. It was as if they had erased his mother's memory. He felt that Mary's legacy, a woman who gave her life there, had been insulted. He did not tell me the details at first. He just became quieter. But it was a different silence from mine that morning. His was sharp, full of thorns. He started coming home later. His breath smelled of alcohol, but I pretended not to notice. Long meeting, he would lie, and I pretended to believe him. Then money started to get scarce. "Dad, can you lend me $200? I will pay you back at the end of the month." I gave it to him. He never paid it back. Then it was 500, and it went on like that. The first time he raised his voice at me in a way that scared me, I will never forget it. It was over something stupid, a kitchen faucet that was dripping. I had asked him 3 times to check it. That Saturday, I asked him again while I was washing some collard greens. He was sitting reading the paper. He did not even look up. "Let it drip, damn it," he muttered with a rudeness that threw me off. But sun water is being wasted, and the noise makes me nervous. Then he exploded. He threw the newspaper on the table with such force that the coffee cup jumped. He stood up, and for the first time he towered over me. He was no longer my boy, my proud youth, but a big, enraged man. "A faucet!" he shouted, and his voice boomed in the kitchen. "You worry more about a damn faucet than my life, which is going down the drain. If Mom were here, she would not have allowed this. She was a real woman. She would have fixed it. But no. I got stuck with you. An old man who worries more about a faucet than his own son." I took a step back. My heart was racing wild. I grabbed the edge of the sink with wet, cold hands. It was not so much what he said, but his eyes. There was something in them I had never seen, a dirty, poisonous resentment. And for the first time in my life, I felt fear of my own son. Not fear that something would happen to him, fear of what he might do. I did not answer. I watched him grab the car keys and leave, slamming the door. I stayed in the kitchen listening to the drip. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop marked the beginning of a new era in this house, the era of fear. I sighed, returning mentally to that cold morning. The smell of biscuits filled the oven again. I took out the tray with the heat hitting my bruised face. The digital frame changed again. A photo of Mary and me on our wedding day, so young with so much hope. "Oh, Mary," I whispered to the empty house, "you would not like at all the man our son has become." I reached for the bowl to start the 3rd batch. I was going to need a lot of biscuits. I had important guests for breakfast, and I knew Judge Linda loved my biscuits with peach preserves. The old grandfather clock in the living room struck 5. The deep chimes expanded through the house, marking another hour of my vigil. I already had 3 trays, cooling golden biscuits lined up like little soldiers. My kitchen, which had always been my refuge, my place of creation, had turned into a war room. My body was starting to send the bill. My back, where I had hit the cabinet, hurt with a constant stab. My swollen lip throbbed. Exhaustion was getting into my veins like a slow poison. I needed coffee. Strong. I went to the counter and pressed the button on the coffee maker. It was one of those programmable ones I bought a few months ago, red, beautiful, matching the kitchen accents. I had bought it, thinking that if Michael woke up with the smell of fresh coffee, maybe he would be in a better mood. Maybe he would not get up with that black cloud over his head. How naive, trying to sweeten the bitterness of a man with the smell of coffee. For months, that coffee maker had been just another tool in my routine of walking on eggshells. I made sure the coffee was ready. His favorite mug, a big blue one, clean in its place, the newspaper on the table. Any detail out of place could be the spark for a whole day of insults or punishing silences. While the hot water started to drip onto the filter and the aroma filled the kitchen, I let myself fall into the chair for a moment. I closed my eyes. The pain in my back intensified, and with it came a wave of memories from the last 2 years. They were not like the happy photos in the frame. They were memories I always pushed to the back of my mind. After that first explosion over the faucet, nothing was ever the same. That incident opened a door inside him, a door through which a monster came out that I did not know. And I, out of fear, out of shame, out of a father's love that was rotting, let him make a nest in my house. The final firing came 6 months later. They called him in on a Friday afternoon, put him in the boss's office, and gave him a cardboard box for his things. 20 years thrown in the trash. He came home pale, carrying the box as if it were a coffin. He did not cry or scream. He left the box in the middle of the living room, went up to his room, and locked himself in for 2 days. I knocked on the door, brought him food, begged him to come out. Nothing. On the 3rd day he came out, but he was no longer himself. What little remained of that proud boy the church applauded disappeared. Since then everything was my fault. If it rained, it was my fault. If his football team lost, it was my fault. And above all, his mother's absence was my fault. You never understood her, he would scream at me with breath smelling of liquor at 3 in the afternoon. Do you think she was happy killing herself at that port? She gave her life for you and for this house. And what did you do? You turned the house into a museum. You worshipped the chair where she sat more than the son she left you. It was cruel, and it was a lie. Mary loved her job. She was proud to support us with her hands. And I loved her. I did not worship things. I took care of memories. But how do you explain that to someone who has decided to rewrite his history to justify his misery? The house, once my refuge, became a battlefield. I learned to read the signs, how he slammed the car door, the sound of his steps on the porch. I could guess just by that if the night would be screaming or frozen silences. Both things were torture. The financial manipulation got worse. He stopped asking to borrow. He started demanding. He started using my credit card without permission. I saw the statements. Charges at bars, liquor stores. I tried to talk to him. Michael, we have to control the spending. The answer was always the same. It is my money too, the money Mom left. Or do you think this house runs itself? He forgot that I had my own pension. Mary's pension and what I still earned doing repairs and small jobs for the neighbors. But in his head, everything was his. The house, the money, and apparently I was also at his disposal, to be used and mistreated. I became a prisoner in my own home. I stopped inviting my friends for coffee. Sometimes my neighbor and best friend, Judge Linda, would look over the fence. Arthur, is everything okay? I have not seen you for days. And I lied. Oh, Linda, it is the rheumatism, you know. I am resting. The shame ate me alive. How was I going to admit that my son, the pride of the neighborhood, treated me like a rag? How could I tell her I was afraid inside my own 4 walls? I remember one night a few months ago. He came home drunk as usual, but this time he was euphoric. He had won some money at a pool game. He came into the living room where I was watching TV and flopped onto the sofa, laughing loudly. He wanted to start talking, but I was exhausted from that emotional roller coaster. I just wanted peace. Son, I am tired. I am going up to sleep, I told him, getting up. The change in his face was instant. The smile vanished. Sure, he said with venom, when I am finally in a good mood, you abandon me. But when I am down, you stand there looking at me with that martyr face as if I were a worm, right? He stood up and planted himself in front of me, blocking the way. He did not touch me, but he got so close I felt his breath. He started speaking softly, and it was worse than when he shouted. You like this, do you not, Dad? You like seeing me suffer. It makes you feel superior. The saintly widower who sacrificed everything for his ungrateful son. Is that the story you tell yourself to sleep? He spent almost 10 minutes spitting that poison at me, and I stood there pinned, shrinking inside. When he finally moved away, I went up the stairs trembling. I locked the door and sat on the bed. And for the first time in a long time, I cried. I cried in silence, pressing my face against the pillow so he would not hear. The beep of the coffee maker brought me back to the morning of the plan. The coffee was ready. I got up the pain in my back, reminding me that the violence of that night had been different. He had crossed a line. He had touched me in a fit of rage. And the slap. That slap was not just on the face. It was on the soul. I opened the cabinet and took out the good china. The set they gave me on my wedding day with little hand-painted blue flowers. I almost never used it. It was for special occasions, and I decided that this precisely was the most special occasion of my life, the day of my liberation. I set the table with almost ceremonial care. Lace tablecloth plates, silver cutlery that I had polished the week before. In a small vase, I placed a white camellia from my garden. The table was beautiful, a picture of peace and order, a perfect lie. As I placed the cups, I thought about the storm that continued outside. The rain hitting the glass, the wind howling. I felt like nature reflected my own chaos. But for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of the storm. Not the one raging outside, nor the one sleeping upstairs. I knew that when the sun came up, my own storm was going to break for real. I looked at the clock. 5:45. I still had time. Time to bake the last batch of biscuits and make the calls that would change everything. The house was about to wake up, and Justice, believe me, was going to be served hot with coffee. It was exactly 3:15 when the key scratched in the lock. I know because the grandfather clock had just struck 3, and I had counted the 15 seconds following it, nailed to the rocking chair, wrapped in my thick navy blue flannel robe. I bought it last winter because the dampness of the port gets into my bones. That morning I clutched it against my chest, seeking warmth, some kind of protection against the cold coming from inside me. The door flew open as if it had been kicked and slammed against the hallway wall. The noise echoed in the silent house. My heart sped up. I held my breath. Michael entered a silhouette cut against the dim streetlight. The rain had soaked him through. Water dripped from his hair and coat, forming a dark puddle on the wooden floor. He looked like a wounded, nervous animal, seeking shelter from the storm. He stood still for a moment, breathing hard like he was growling, and then he moved. He took the bunch of keys from his pocket and threw it with all his strength toward the hall table. I heard the dry crunch of ceramic. My blue vase, my grandmother's. That sound was like hearing my own heart break. A dry sob rose to my throat, but I swallowed it. Crying in that moment was not only a luxury, it was dangerous. He did not even look at what he had broken. He slammed the door and came toward the kitchen. His heavy, uneven steps approached. The smell arrived first. A sour stench of cheap liquor mixed with rain and pure rage. He planted himself in the kitchen doorway, his big body filling the frame. The only light was the bulb over the stove yellow, lengthening the shadows. His eyes found me in the gloom. "What is it, Dad?" He slurred with his tongue thick from alcohol. "Sitting here in the dark like a ghost waiting to lecture me, right?" I did not move. My hands gripped the arms of the rocking chair, feeling the worn wood under my fingers. I knew from experience that any gesture could be taken as provocation. Silence was my only shield. "Answer me!" he shouted suddenly, and his voice resonated in the pots hanging on the wall. "Are you praying for my lost soul? Or are you more worried about your damn old vase that I broke?" Mentioning the vase, knowing what it meant to me, gave me a courage I did not know I had left. I stopped rocking. I stood up slowly with the little dignity I had left. My back cracked. I looked him in the eyes, searching deep down for any trace of my boy. "Michael's son," I said, and my voice came out firmer than I expected. "I am not going to lecture you. I just want you to go upstairs and rest. You are soaked. You are going to catch a cold. We will talk tomorrow when you are better. It was the worst thing I could say. Trying to be reasonable with someone who has lost their reason is like trying to put out a fire with a teaspoon of water. My words, my calm, my fatherly concern sounded to his ears like an insult, like I was treating him like a kid. His face twisted into a grimace of fury. "Do not tell me what to do," he roared, taking another step toward me. He pointed at my face with a trembling finger. "You do not understand anything. You never understood anything. You live in your fairy tale world, with your old junk, your memories, the ghost of Mom. The real world is out there, Dad, and it is eating me alive. And you sit here and tell me to go to bed. It is not that, son." I started raising my hand in a sign of peace. "Shut up." The shout was so violent I flinched, and then he lunged. This time it was not a shove, it was a full-blown assault. He grabbed me by the upper arms with a strength I had never seen in him, a strength made of frustration and alcohol. His fingers dug into my thin skin like steel pincers. The pain was immediate. "Michael, stop, please," I managed to say. "You are hurting me." He was not listening. He had a lost look fixed on something only he saw. He started shaking me back and forth violently. My old body oscillated like a rag doll. My head went from side to side. My glasses flew off and fell to the floor with a little clatter. Everything became a blur. Shelves, fridge table. "You only care about things this house hurt," he was shouting. "I was never anything to you. I was always the burden, the failed son of the great Mary." In a moment, my feet stopped touching the floor, and he threw me. He did not push me. He threw me. I flew toward the wall where my grandmother's cabinet stood. Time slowed down. I saw the dark wood approaching slowly and at the same time too fast. I did not have time to protect myself. The impact was brutal. First my back, a dry hit against the wood. I felt like my spine was snapping. The air escaped me in a groan, and immediately my head, dragged by inertia, hit against the corner of the furniture. An explosion of white light behind my eyes, a dry crack in my skull. The world went white for a second. A sharp ringing filled my ears. I slid down the wall to the floor, my legs soft as jelly. The pain was absolute. Whips on my neck, knives in my back, burning in my arms where he had held me. I was stunned, disoriented. I tried to focus. Everything was spinning. I saw him a few steps away, chest-heaving, fists clenched. He looked at me from above with an expression I could not read. I thought, that is it. It is over now. He will realize what he has done. But no. He took another step. I shrank instinctively, raising my arms to cover myself, and his hand came open fast, violent. The slap resonated with a wet, dirty sound. He hit me full in the face. My head snapped to the side. I felt my lips split as it hit against my own teeth, and the hot, salty taste of blood filled my mouth. That was the final act. He stood there for a few seconds looking at me lying on the floor, my son, the baby I taught to walk, to talk, to pray. And I did not recognize him. The man standing before me with those eyes full of hate was a stranger, an intruder, a monster. And then, without saying a single word, as if he had finally expelled all his poison, he turned around. He left me there, bruised and bleeding on the kitchen floor, and went up the stairs. I heard his heavy steps above the creaking of the hallway, then the slam of his door. That sound sealed his fate, and mine. The silence that fell in the kitchen after the slam was the heaviest thing I have felt in my life. It was not a quiet silence. It was a void. A silence of an explosion of after a bomb, when everything has been destroyed and the dust has not settled yet. Only the rain could be heard stubborn, and the constant ringing inside my head. I stayed on the floor, curled up with my arms around my knees, like a scared old man. And for a moment, that was exactly what I was. A 68-year-old man, alone, injured, on the floor of his own house because of the person he loved most. The tears started to fall, silent hot, sliding down my cheeks and mixing with the blood on my chin. They were not tears of anger, they were of absolute pain. Not just physical, but of betrayal. The pain of looking at the son you raised and seeing a stranger. The pain of realizing that the love you gave, the life you gave, had produced this. A man capable of raising his hand to his father. I thought of Mary. What would she say if she saw me like this? She was a sweet woman, but firm. In 30 years, she never raised her voice at me. She treated her own father as if he were made of glass. If she saw what her son had become, her heart would break all over again wherever she was. The image of my wife gave me a spark of strength. I could not stay on the floor crying. Mary would not have wanted that. My mother neither. My grandmother, who faced things I cannot even imagine, much less. I was made of something harder. I had forgotten. With a groan, I pushed myself up, holding on to the table leg. The cold wood was my anchor. Little by little, inch by inch, I got to my feet. My legs were trembling. I held on to the edge of the table, breathing deep so I would not faint. Everything was moving. When I felt a little steadier, I went leaning on the furniture to the hallway bathroom. Every step hurt. I turned on the light. I looked in the mirror. The yellow light was unforgiving. The man looking back at me was broken. My gray hair, which I always wear combed back, was messed up strands sticking to the sweat. My face, my left cheek, red, swollen, the skin around the eye darkening already into an ugly purple. My lip split, swollen with a dark scab of dried blood in the corner. I raised my hand and brushed the bruise with my fingertips. The skin burned, and touching it, I did not feel just physical pain. I felt humiliation, shame. That mark was not just a blow. It was the visible proof of my failure. The failure of a father who did not see the monster growing. The failure of a man who let fear silence him. And it was right there, looking at that mark, when the sadness started to transform into something else. Something cold, hard rage. Not Michael's hot, explosive rage. It was a cold, calculated rage. A rage that does not shout, it whispers, and what it whispered was never again. I turned on the cold water, cupped my hands, and splashed water on my face 1, 2, 3 times. It stung my lip, but it was a pain that woke me up. I washed away the blood, the sweat, the tears. I dried myself with a small towel, dabbing around the injury. I looked at myself again. The broken old man was gone. The one looking back had steel in his eyes. There was pain, a very deep one that maybe would never go away, but fear not any more. The fear had burned away with that cold rage. In its place was decision. A deadly calm, the calm of someone who has hit bottom and discovered the ground is rock, and from there can push off to rise. I thought about my options. I could do nothing. In the morning I would put on stage makeup if needed to cover the bruise. I would say I fell. Michael might come down with a repentant child's voice, teary, promising it would not happen again. I would pretend to believe him, and we would go back to the same dance, walking on broken glass until the next explosion. Until when? Until he pushed me harder? Until my head hit a corner and I did not get up? No, that option was dead and buried. I could pack a suitcase and leave. Call Sarah, ask her for shelter. Abandon my house, my memories, my life. Leave Michael there drowning in his bitterness and alcohol. But that house was mine. Mary and I paid for it with our sweat. Why did I have to run? I had done nothing wrong. I was not going to be the fugitive. I refused. Only the third option remained the hardest, the most painful. The only one that could truly save my life, and in a way who knows his too. I left the bathroom. The kitchen was still a mess. My glasses were on the floor near the rocking chair. I picked them up. One of the lenses was cracked. I put them on anyway. The crack in the glass was the perfect symbol of how I saw the world now. Everything was broken. I crossed the gloomy living room. The tick-tock of the clock sounded louder, marking the rhythm of my decision. I went to the phone, one of those old rotary ones I have on a side table, but I did not use it. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the cordless one, the one I bought a few years ago, with big lighted keys meant for old folks. I bought it because sometimes my fingers get stiff from arthritis. I never imagined how grateful I would be to have those big buttons, because in that moment my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a nervous determination. I took the device to the dining room. I sat in my chair at the head of the table, the same chair where hours later everything would happen. I took a deep breath and made the first call. The night was still dark, but my mind had never been so clear. My plan started to come together, piece by piece. It was not a revenge plan. It was a survival plan. I did not want to destroy my son. I wanted to stop the monster he had become, and if for that I had to break his heart and mine into 1,000 pieces, so be it. Some hearts need to break so the light can get in. I thought about the concealer I had lying around in a drawer for age spots, for dark circles. For a second I thought about using it. Then I opened the drawer, saw it, and slammed it shut. No more covering up. No more hiding. The truth, however ugly, had to be seen. Above all, Michael had to look at it straight in the light of day. The shame would no longer be just mine. From that moment, I was going to share it with him. I was sitting in the darkness of the dining room with the heavy cordless phone in my hand. The silence of the house was almost absolute, broken only by the rain and the electric hum of the refrigerator. I looked at the lighted keys. Each number seemed like a challenge. Dialing meant making it real. It meant crossing a point of no return. For a second, the father in me, the one who spent whole nights nursing fevers and helping with homework, hesitated. A weak voice whispered, "He is your son, Arthur, your only son." How are you going to do this to him? Then the throb in my head beat strong, and the metallic taste returned to my mouth. The doubt evaporated. That man snoring upstairs was not my boy. My boy would never have thrown me against a piece of furniture nor slapped me. That man was a dangerous stranger, and I had to protect myself. I took a breath and dialed the first number. My hands shook, but my fingers pressed firmly. The ringing tone that brrr, brrr sounded obscenely loud in the silent house. It was almost 4 a.m. I was waking up a 73-year-old retired judge. On the third ring, a sleepy but instantly alert voice answered. "Hello? Linda, it is me, Arthur. Forgive the hour, please." There was a pause. I heard her move the rustle of sheets. The sleepiness left her instantly replaced by concern. "Arthur, for God's sake, what happened? Are you okay?" "It is about Michael. Judge Linda Rivas has been my neighbor for over 40 years. We have seen our children grow up door to door. We have buried our spouses a few months apart. We have shared countless cups of coffee on the porch. But Linda is more than a friend. Before retiring, she was one of the most respected judges in the region, one of those women who faced a system made for men, and won. Her mind is sharper than any knife. Her presence commands respect in any room. If anyone could understand the mix of love and terror I carried inside, it was her. I swallowed hard. The shame burned in my throat. "I need you, Linda," I managed to say. It happened again. But this time, it was worse. I did not have to explain more. She sighed on the other end, a heavy sigh, not of surprise, but of sad confirmation. "He hurt you, Arthur." My eyes filled with tears, but my voice came out firm. "Yes. Call the police," she said without hesitating. "This is not a consultation, it is an order." "I'm going to call," I answered. "But before that, I need to ask you something. I know it is a lot, but could you come for breakfast at 8 o'clock sharp?" Silence. I felt her mental gears turning. She did not ask why a breakfast in the middle of such a disaster. She understood. She understood it was not about food, but about witnesses, about authority. "I am not coming for breakfast," she said at last, with a voice hard as marble. "I am coming to hold a hearing. Where is your son now?" "Sleeping off the drunk," I whispered. "Good," she said. "Let him sleep. Do not speak to him. Do not make noise. Just do what you have to do. I will be there at 8, and—" "Arthur?" "Yes, you are doing the right thing. The hardest thing, and the most right thing. I am proud of you." When I hung up, I felt a wave of relief, so big my knees almost buckled. I was no longer alone. The cavalry was on the way, and mine wore an impeccable linen suit and knew the Constitution by heart. I took a deep breath and dialed the second number. The police. An operator on duty answered with a tired voice. "City Police." "What is your emergency?" "It is not exactly an emergency right now," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "My name is Arthur Sullivan. I would like to speak with Inspector Daniel Miller, if possible." "Sir, it is 4:30 in the morning. The inspector is off duty." I know I insisted with a firmness that surprised myself. "We go to the same church, New Hope Baptist. Please, I need you to locate him. It is for a case of domestic violence. I am the victim." The operator's tone changed instantly. Bureaucracy gave way to urgency. "One moment, sir." I waited with my heart pounding against my ribs. "Inspector Daniel is a good man, a deacon at the church. He has seen Michael grow up, had him in the youth group. But he is also a cop." I was not calling Brother Daniel. I was calling Inspector Miller, and I needed him to act like one. After a few minutes that felt eternal, his deep-known voice sounded on the other end, still heavy with sleep. "Brother Arthur, what is happening? Are you safe?" And for the second time that night, I had to tell it. I had to turn my shame into words. "Daniel, Michael assaulted me. He came home drunk and hit me." My voice broke on hit. I heard on the other end the sound of someone dressing quickly. "Where is he now, brother? Is he still there? Do you need me to send a patrol right now?" No, I said too fast. "He is asleep. Now I am sure. I do not want them to come now. I do not want sirens or lights waking up the whole neighborhood. I want to do it my way with dignity." I knew I was asking for something outside protocol. "I have a plan," I added. "At 8 o'clock, Judge Linda Rivas will be here. I want you to come too, Daniel. You and 2 other officers. I want you to come in, sit down, and handle it like civilized people before you take him away." Daniel sighed, torn between the rule and affection. "That is highly irregular, brother." "I know," I said. "But you know me. You know Michael. You know that if a squad car arrives with sirens blaring, he will spin out of control, he will shout, he will resist. I do not want a show. I want him to look me in the eye, to look at Judge Linda, to look at you. I want him to understand what he has done. I do not want it to be another drunk dragged out of his house. I want him to feel the weight of his people's disappointment. Do you understand me?" He kept silent a moment. "I understand you," he said finally. "At 8 o'clock sharp, I will be there. But promise me something. As soon as we hang up, lock your room. If he wakes up and something happens, call me immediately. I promise." "Thank you, Daniel. May God watch over you, brother." He hung up. 2 calls made one personal one left. I dialed Sarah's number in the Capitol. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting. "I knew it was you," was the first thing she said. "I felt it." "What did he do to you?" "That is my sister. She has always had that invisible thread with me." I told her everything. The broken vase, the shouting, the shove, the slap. She listened in silence. Only her breathing could be heard. When I finished, she did not say, "I warned you," or "You should have left sooner." She just asked, with a voice tight with rage and affection, "What are you going to do?" "I called Linda and Inspector Daniel." I answered, exhausted. "They are coming at 8. I am turning him in." A sob escaped her. "Oh, Arthur." "Oh, I am so sorry." "I know. I just wanted you to know. Someone in the family needs to know what I am doing, so that if I ever doubt you remind me of tonight, I will remind you," she promised. "Tomorrow morning I am taking the first bus. I will be there by afternoon." "Thank you. Take care, and remember this. You are the strongest man I know." I hung up. I placed the cordless phone on its base. The 3 pillars of my plan were standing: moral authority, the law, and family. I was exhausted, broken to the soul, but at the same time I felt strangely light, as if a 2-ton weight had been lifted from my back, the weight of silence. I looked at the clock. Almost 6. The sky was starting to lighten from a deep black to a bruised gray blue. The storm outside was subsiding. I had 2 hours. 2 hours to finish breakfast, to get cleaned up, to prepare for the final battle. I went to the kitchen and started making the peach preserves. Justice, after all, was going to be served with a bittersweet taste. The gray light of dawn started to sneak through the windows, revealing the silent disorder of my vigil. Flour on the floor, dirty bowls in the sink, the sweet, heavy smell of biscuits permeating everything. The sky was pale, washed by rain. It was the calm after the storm, and I felt a similar calm inside. Strange cold, but firm. Fatigue weighed on my shoulders like a cloak. But my mind was working sharp, less than 2 hours. I had to set the scene. It was not enough to have the law on my side. Michael needed to see what he was losing, see in a concrete way the home he was destroying, the father he was throwing overboard. The punishment would not be just legal, but visual and emotional. I started cleaning the kitchen with a new energy. I washed the dishes, scrubbing hard as if I wanted to scrub all the filth off my own soul. I dried them, put them away. I swept the flour from the floor. In 20 minutes, the kitchen shone as if the violence of the night had never happened. It was a facade, a pretty orderly lie, just like my life for the last 2 years. Then I busied myself with the food. The biscuits were done, piles of them on a white ceramic platter. I went to the pantry and took out a can of peaches and syrup. I emptied the contents into a saucepan. I added brown sugar, a pinch of cinnamon, and grated nutmeg. While they simmered, the sweet, spiced smell mixed with the butter. It was the smell of Michael's childhood. When he got sick, I made him that same jam to eat with toast. He called it my sweet medicine. What irony! That morning I was preparing the bitterest medicine of his life, and he did not even suspect it. While the preserves thickened, I put a big pot with water and salt to make grits, nice and creamy, with butter and a little sharp cheese at the end. Soul food the old-fashioned way, but that day they tasted more like a Last Supper. While the water boiled, I focused on an important detail: the knives. I had a set Mary gave me years ago, but the handle of my favorite knife had cracked. Sarah, always attentive, sent me a new set of German steel in a wood block. I kept them razor sharp. I took out the small knife to cut fruit, strawberries, melon, to garnish the table. Every cut was clean, precise. I moved like the man I have been all my life, a practical cook. But that morning there was something else in my hands, the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation on which the patient's life depended. And in a way, my life depended on what was about to happen. With the food almost ready, it was time for the table. I opened the china cabinet, the same one I had hit. I ran my hand over the dark wood, feeling the history in every grain. Inside was my inheritance, the wedding china, my mother's glasses. First, the tablecloth. I went to the hall closet and took out the best one white linen, with lace handmade by my grandmother. I used it so little it still smelled of the lavender sachets in the drawer. I spread it over the table. The pure white covered the wood like a canvas ready for the scene. Then the china. I took out plates, cup saucers, white with gold rim, and little blue flowers. I washed them one by one to remove the dust, dried them with a soft cloth, and set 4 places. One at the head for me, another to my right for Judge Linda, another to my left for Inspector Daniel, and the last one at the other end, opposite me, in Michael's place. I placed the silver cutlery, the folded linen napkins, the vase with a white camellia in the center. The table looked set for a king or for a sacrifice. Sometimes the line between both is very fine. Everything was ready. The food, the table. Only I was missing. I went up the stairs. They creaked, always in the same pattern. I passed by Michael's door. I could hear him snore, that heavy snore of someone sleeping without conscience, without any idea of the earthquake coming his way. For an instant I felt a prick of pity, an almost unbearable desire to open the door, shake him and shout, "Wake up, son! Wake up, before it is too late!" But I did not. I inhaled deep and continued to my room. My room was my refuge, orderly, simple, the patchwork quilt, made by me, lace curtains filtering the gray light. I went into the bathroom and looked in the big mirror. The blow was worse. the bruise under the eye almost black, the lip more swollen. I needed a shower. I washed away the fear, the flour, the sweat. I turned on the hot water. I let the steam fill the bathroom. While the water ran down my bruised back, it burned, but also soothed. I tried not to think. Just feel the water, the soap. When I got out, I dried myself and went to the closet. I did not hesitate. I went to the back, where I hang the clothes I almost never use, and took out the suit. A dark suit, Sunday best, navy blue, almost black single-breasted jacket, and well-pressed trousers, white starched shirt. Elegant, sober, the kind used for church for a funeral, or as he was going to discover, for a trial. I put it on. It fit perfectly. I combed my hair back carefully. I went back to the mirror. The contrast of the dark suit with my pale skin and the bruises made the marks stand out more. And that was exactly what I wanted. I was not going to hide anything. My wounds were going to be my witnesses. I put on the lumbar support belt I had stored skin-colored discreet. I fastened it under my shirt, pulling it tight. It held my back immediately, relieving the pain of the hit against the cabinet and forcing me to stay upright. I was not going to slouch. Not that day. I looked at the clock on the nightstand, 7:40. It was almost time. I went back down. The house smelled of coffee and warm bread. I filled the porcelain pot with the fresh coffee, served the grits, in a tureen the preserves, in a glass bowl. I placed everything on the table. All perfect, dangerously perfect. I sat in my chair at the head. I smoothed my trousers over my knees. My hands were calm. My heart beat at a slow and steady rhythm. I was ready. Then I heard him. The steps upstairs, the groan of the bed, the shuffling of bare feet on the wood. I knew that ritual like a prayer. It was the sound of a hangover, of a man moving through a fog of headache and slight remorse. I remained seated, motionless hands clasped on my lap. I was the image of serenity, a statue at the head of a war table. The bathwater started to run, a quick shower. He always did that, as if the water could wash away not only the body's dirt, but the soul's. Poor thing. His dirt was deeper. The steps resumed their path, now coming down the stairs, one step after another, heavy. I could guess which step he was on by the creak halfway through from the end in the hall. There was a pause. I knew what he was seeing. The hall table and the pieces of my blue vase on the floor. I had not picked them up. I left them on purpose so they would be the first thing he saw. I hoped it would arouse some shame in him. What I heard was not a sigh of regret, but a snort of contempt. Then the noise of the pieces being kicked toward the corner with the toe of his shoe as if they were trash. In that instant, any remnant of compassion left in me evaporated. Only the coldness of my decision remained. And then he appeared in the dining room frame. He stood there, leaning on the jamb, blinking from the light. The morning sun came in through the big window, illuminating the set table. He wore wrinkled khaki pants and an old polo shirt, hair still damp, face-swollen eyes, small and reddened. He had days-old stubble, giving him a neglected, defeated air. He looked at the scene, the white tablecloth, fine china, shiny silverware, steaming dishes, the smell of coffee bread and cinnamon. He frowned, confused. He expected shouting reproaches, or, at most, my resentful silence. He was not prepared for that unexplained celebration. He looked at me and for the first time seemed to see my face. I saw how his eyes stopped a second on my swollen lip, on the bruise on my cheek. His reaction was not horror or guilt. It was an almost imperceptible twitch at the corners of his mouth, a spark of satisfaction, of power. Confusion gave way to something else, arrogance. A slow, crooked smile appeared. He had interpreted everything backward. In his sick mind, that banquet was not a trap, but a peace offering, a white flag. In his head, the slap, the night before, had worked. Finally, he had broken me. He had put me in my place. And now, like a good submissive father, I was entertaining him, asking for forgiveness, with food. It was so absurd, so twisted, I almost would have laughed if it were not so tragic. Well, well, he said with a hoarse voice, quite a banquet. To what do we owe this honor? I did not answer. I looked at him face neutral. My silence seemed to amuse him even more. He dragged the chair from the other end and let himself fall with a thud. He grabbed the linen napkin, looked at it with fake refinement, and let it fall on his legs. He reached out and took the most perfect biscuit from the basket. We have to admit it, Dad, he said, raising it like a toast. Nobody makes biscuits like you. He took a huge bite. He chewed with his mouth open, dropping crumbs on the white tablecloth. After swallowing, he pointed with the piece he had left, pointing at me with it. That is the way. Dad, he said, voice full of that cruel pride. You see how, with a little discipline, things go back to their place. I am in charge here, period. His words pierced me, but I did not let it show. On the outside, I was ice. Inside, every phrase was one more nail in the coffin of my previous life. There was no remorse. There was pride. Pride in having hit me and having humiliated me. He believed violence was the answer. I looked at him from the other end. The silence stretched. He shrugged. He went to pour himself coffee. Just then the doorbell rang. Ding dong. A clear, precise, punctual sound. Michael froze, hand suspended over the coffee pot. A wrinkle of annoyance marked his forehead. Who the hell is coming at this hour? Did you invite someone? Yes, I said. It was the first word I spoke that morning. My voice sounded calm, firm. I invited them. What? He grunted, slamming the cup down. I do not want to see anyone. Send them away, whoever it is. I ignored the order. I put my hands on the table. I sat up slowly and stood. I smoothed the front of my jacket. I walked without rushing down the hall. Dad, did you not hear me? He shouted behind me. I said, send them away. I did not look back. My shoes made a soft sound on the wood. I reached the door. I took a deep breath. I saw my distorted reflection in the glass. A man in dark blue face, battered, but the posture of an old king. It was the moment. I turned the knob and opened. The morning air, fresh and damp, entered the house. On the porch were the three people I expected. Judge Linda, impeccable in a peach linen suit, pearl necklace, and a serious expression that would make any lawyer tremble. Beside her, Inspector Daniel, tall uniform, perfectly pressed cap in hand, face hard with concern and duty. Behind them, two young officers with professional, neutral expressions. I looked at Linda. She looked at my face, my lip, my eye. I saw a flash of fury in her gaze, but she controlled it in a second. She only nodded, barely. I am here, that minimal gesture said. Good morning, Arthur, she said with the firm voice of a judge. Good morning, Linda. Inspector, I responded with the same calm. Come in. Coffee is served. I stepped aside. They entered in silence one by one. Their mere presence filled the hall. Authority entering my house. They walked behind me toward the dining room. Michael, who had gotten up annoyed by the commotion, was in the doorway when he saw us appear. And there it was when his world came crashing down. Upon seeing the group enter, seeing Judge Linda with her courtroom bearing, seeing Daniel's uniform, and the other officers, his face came undone. The arrogance evaporated like sugar in water. It went from annoyance to confusion, and from confusion to absolute panic. The blood drained from his face. His eyes went from me to them, from them to me. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The hand holding the piece of biscuit went limp. The biscuit fell, hit the porcelain plate with a dry clink, rolled and crumbled on the floor. That small sound marked the end of his reign. The silence suddenly was heavy. Only the tick-tock of the clock in the living room could be heard. Every second marked Michael's agony. He was frozen, face gray, eyes wide, looking for an exit where there was none. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw a terrified question in his eyes. Dad, what have you done? I did not have to answer. Judge Linda did it with her actions. With a calm as elegant as it was intimidating, she took a step forward. She ignored Michael as if he were a piece of furniture. She walked to the table with a firm step. She did not sit in the spot I had set to my right. No. She went to the head opposite the chair Michael had left empty, the chair that by right had always been mine, and Mary's the head of the family. She dragged it with a smooth movement. The sound of wood on the floor resonated in the room. She sat down. She adjusted her jacket, placed her purse on the floor, and then, yes, she looked at Michael. There was no anger or compassion in her look, only the weight of 60 years of friendship with me and a lifetime applying the law. It was a look that stripped the soul. Under it, Michael seemed to shrink. That big man who hours before had thrown me against the wall now looked like a clumsy, scared child standing in a room too big for him. The inspector and the other 2 officers stood in the doorway, positioned strategically. They said nothing. It was not necessary. Their uniforms, their belts with the weapons, said it all. They were the consequence. Judge Linda reached out and took the porcelain pot. "This coffee smells wonderful, Arthur," she said, with the same voice she would use at a tea for seniors. She poured a cup, added a little milk, stirred with a silver spoon. The tinkling of metal against porcelain cut the tension. She took a sip, put the cup down carefully, and finally spoke to Michael. "Michael," she started, and her voice was low but filled the room. "I remember when you were a boy, and you came running to the fence with a dandelion in your hand. Look, Aunt Linda, a flower for you." She swallowed. "I remember you carrying my market bags, even though they were heavier than me. You were so polite, so attentive. 'Let me get that, Aunt Linda, do not strain yourself,' you used to say." She paused, took another sip. Every word was a small blow of reality, the description of the man he should be versus who he was now. It was not an accusation, it was a eulogy. "Your mother?" she added, and Mary's name hung in the air. Would she be so proud of that boy? The one who became a man, entered college, the pride of the neighborhood of his father. She looked at me a second, then back to Michael. Her tone hardened. "Where is that man, Michael?" He opened his mouth. "Aunt Linda, I do not know what you are talking about. This is just a family misunderstanding." It was the worst thing he could have said. "A family misunderstanding?" she repeated with irony. "Look at your father's face, Michael. Look at it well. That split lip, that bruise under the eye. Does that look like a misunderstanding to you?" He lowered his gaze to the floor, to the biscuit crumbs. "No," she said, voice now sharp. "That has a name, and we both know what it is." That was the signal for the inspector. He stepped forward, taking a small notebook from his pocket. His presence became larger. "Michael Sullivan," he said without a trace of the brother. "Daniel we knew from church. In the last 6 months, we have received several complaints from neighbors. Loud music, shouting, arguments at odd hours." Michael shrank even more. "We also have a record of an altercation at the Salty Dog Bar 3 weeks ago. You were seen involved in a fight. You left with a warning." He looked up, surprised. He knew. "And we have notice of 2 traffic stops, where you were almost pulled over for reckless driving after leaving that same bar. In summary," he closed the notebook, "you were already on our radar." A heavy silence fell. And then today at 4:37, I received a call. Report of assault at this address. The victim, your father, Arthur Sullivan. Every word from the inspector was another nail. His record read aloud in the dining room of his childhood, in front of the man who watched him grow. The humiliation was almost tangible. I stood up. All eyes came to me. My back hurt, but the belt held me straight. I was not going to bend. I walked around the table and stood next to Linda's chair. I put my hand on her shoulder and felt her firmness. I looked at my son. For the first time in a long time. It was he who looked away. "Michael," I began with a voice I did not recognize as mine. It had no sweetness, only the clarity of someone who has crossed hell. "I want you to understand something. This is not about hate. It is about something more complicated." Before coming down to the dining room, I had put a little balm on my lips. No color. I did not want to disguise, just prevent them from splitting more. What I had to say had to come out whole without stuttering. I did not call them out. Of hate? "Michael," I said, marking every syllable. "I called them because I love you." He let out a bitter laugh. You love me? And that is why you call the police? Sometimes I answered without blinking. The greatest act of love is not protecting someone from the consequences of their actions, but putting them right in front of them clear, so they cannot dodge them. The room went silent. Only the steam from the coffee moved, rising in little threads. The trap was set, the witnesses in place, the law present. It was time for the victim to speak. Michael gave a nervous little laugh. You call this love? His voice broke. This is betrayal. You hand me over to strangers. It is a family matter, Dad. Ours. No Michael Linda cut in cold as a scalpel. It stopped being a family matter when you raised your hand against the man who raised you. In that moment, it became a matter for the community, for the law, and if you allow me mine too. The force of that last sentence shut him up. Arguing with me was one thing. Arguing with Judge Linda Rivas, quite another. I still had my hand on her shoulder, drinking from her strength. I looked at my son, that scared man-child across the table, and finally, the torrent of words I had been swallowing for 2 years came out. Family matter, I repeated, voice low but charged. Let's talk about family then. Family is your mother Mary. Getting up at night to work a double shift at the port, hands full of calluses back, aching so you could have books and food. That is family. I took a step toward him. Family is me, Michael. When she died, I did whatever sewing, cleaning, carrying sacks, so you would not lack college tuition, so you could have a better life than ours. He sank a little in the chair. And what did you do with that family? I continued now, voice trembling, not from weakness, but from a righteous rage. You took your mother's sacrifice and mine and spat on it. You took the pain of your demotion, your frustration, your inability to face life as a man, and turned it into a weapon. And you pointed that weapon at me, the only person in the world who never, never let go of your hand. Tears began to fall, but I did not wipe them. I let them run liquid witnesses of my pain. Night after night, Michael, I whispered. Night after night, I sit in that kitchen and pray. But my prayers changed. Before I asked for your future, for your safety. Now I ask God that you come home and go straight to bed, that you do not speak to me. I ask that your poison does not splash me. I ask to be invisible in my own house. You have turned my home into a prison. You have turned my fatherly love into a sentence. I did not want to hurt you, he stammered, lifting his head at last. His eyes were full of tears, but they were tears of self-pity. I had too much. I lost my head. It will not happen again, Dad. I swear. I swear to God. No, I interrupted, shaking my head slowly. Do not invoke God's name in this house. Not today. How many times have I heard you say it will not happen again? How many hungover mornings crying, asking for forgiveness? And I, like a fool, believed them all. I forgave you. I covered for you. I cleaned up your messes. I lied to the neighbors. I hid my tears. I protected you. And do you know what my forgiveness achieved? I leaned over the table, resting my knuckles on the tablecloth. It gave you permission. My silence and my forgiveness told you it was okay to shout, break, humiliate. And last night they told you that you could hit me. The word hit remained floating, indelible. And do you know what was the worst? I continued in a hoarse whisper. It was not the pain. The physical pain goes away. The bruise will go down. The lip will heal. The worst was your silence after your back going up the stairs, as if you had just stepped on an insect. Your absolute lack of remorse. I looked at the inspector. He had a serious face and moist eyes. Father of 2 girls, he understood. I saw you born, Michael, I continued. I was there when your mother screamed in pain and joy in the same room. I held you in my arms when you were still purple and crying, and I thought there was nothing in the world I would not do for you. And the love I feel for you remains the strongest thing I have. But my love does not force me to be your punching bag. My love does not force me to be an accomplice to your destruction. Protecting you from yourself at this point would be that helping you destroy yourself and take me with you. He started crying for real with a child's sobs. Dad, please do not do this. I will go to rehab, quit alcohol, go back to church, whatever you want, but do not let them take me. Please, it is a family thing. It's a family. The inspector cleared his throat. The law is clear in cases of assault, Michael, he said without hesitation. It is not something we can ignore. And what will people say? He tried, in a last desperate attempt, appealing to my shame. It was then I looked at my wristwatch, the one that was Mary's. 8:15. I turned my eyes back to him. I do not care what people say any more, I answered calmly. I have spent 2 years living, worried about that. And look where we are. From today there are 2 things that matter to me, my life and my peace. And my peace? Michael starts with your absence from this house. I sat back in my seat. I took the napkin, placed it on my lap, and served myself some grits. I was not going to eat them. My stomach was in knots, but the gesture was symbolic. I was reclaiming my table, my life. Linda nodded. She looked at Michael, who was a mess. Your tears do not move me, boy, she said without a shred of sweetness. An abuser's tears are always for himself, never for the pain he has caused. Your father doing this is giving you the only chance you have left looking in the mirror, without excuses, without the bottle, without the shield of his easy forgiveness. He is forcing you to grow up, and that Michael is the hardest and truest act of love you will ever receive. Then she looked at the inspector and made a slight gesture. It was the gavel hitting the table. The trial was over. The sentence was coming. The inspector put away the notebook, took a step forward. The young officer positioned himself behind Michael. The air, which was already dense, became almost unbreathable. Michael Sullivan, Daniel said with official voice. Stand up, please, and put your hands behind your back. Michael's sobs cut off. He looked up with a mix of panic and disbelief. You cannot be serious, he stammered. Daniel, please, you have seen me since I was a boy. Are you going to arrest me in my house in front of my father? I am arresting you precisely for your father, he replied, and because the law compels me. Do not make this harder. The officer took a step. That movement was what broke him. He pushed the chair back with a bang and stood up suddenly, face red with rage. Do not touch me, he bellowed, pointing at the people. This is absurd. It is family business. He is my father. We argued. I lost my temper. Tell them, Dad. Tell them you do not want to press charges. Everyone in the room turned to me. It was the last open door to back out. For a second my heart shrank. Seeing my son like that cornered hurt more than any blow. I had in my hand a silk handkerchief Mary gave me with magnolias printed on it. I had grabbed it, coming down, anticipating tears. I was squeezing it so hard my knuckles had turned white. I looked at him. I looked at that man I myself had brought into this world, the one I taught to ride a bike, to drive, to shave. And I found my voice. I have said everything I had to say, Michael. I answered, voice low but clear. I am not going to lie for you. Never again. Those words were the signature at the bottom of the sentence. His face crumbled. Rage gave way to total despair. His shoulders slumped. Please, he whispered. Do not do this. The inspector waited no longer. With a movement learned 100 times, he took his arm and turned him. The other officer held the other hand, and then it sounded. The metallic click of handcuffs closing the sound of my freedom and his deepest bottom. Michael let out a moan of defeat. He did not struggle any more. He stood still, head down, shoulders slumped, while Daniel read him his rights. It was not exactly the speech from the movies, but the essentials were there. He had the right to an attorney to remain silent, that anything he said would be used against him. As they led him out of the dining room, he passed by me and stopped for an instant. He raised his head and looked at me, face wet with tears. I thought he was going to ask for forgiveness. You are going to regret this, Dad, he said instead with a thread of poisoned voice. You are going to be left alone in this old house with your junk, and you're going to regret it. It was his last attempt to instill fear, but fear in me had died that morning. I looked at him without blinking. I did not feel hate. I felt immense sadness and pity. It may be that one day it hurts me that we came to this, I answered serene. but I will never regret having chosen my own life today." The inspector pulled him gently, and they continued toward the door. I heard them cross the hall. The other officer opened the door. Sunlight flooded in. I did not go to the door. I did not want to see the faces of the neighbors peeking out windows. I did not want to see my son's expression getting into the car. I stayed in the dining room entrance inside. I listened to his steps on the porch, the low voice of the inspector, and then the car door slam, a hollow sound, then the engine moving away, until everything went silent. But it was another kind of silence, not the heavy silence of the early morning, but a light one. Painful, yes, but clean, the silence of a house without fear. I stood there, I do not know how long. My muscles tense for hours started to loosen. The adrenaline left, leaving a ferocious exhaustion. My knees buckled. Before falling, I felt a firm hand on my arm. It was Linda. The officer who had stayed pulled out a chair. "It is over, Arthur," she said for the first time with a soft voice. "It is over." It was then, sitting in my own dining room with the smell of coffee and biscuits still in the air, and my best friend by my side, that I allowed myself to fall apart. I covered my face with my hands and cried. I cried for the loss of my son, for the shame, for the pain. I cried for the child he was and the man he never became. I cried for the loneliness I knew awaited me, and I cried also for the terrifying relief of being finally free. The days after Michael's arrest were the strangest of my life. The house felt huge to me. Every creak, every tick of the clock resonated in the hole he had left. At first I expected him around every corner. I expected to hear his steps on the stairs, the TV at full volume. But there was nothing, only silence, a silence that the first few days was as deafening as his screams had been before. Linda and Sarah became my little army. Sarah picked up the pieces of the vase with a quiet rage. "I am going to glue every piece, Arthur," she told me. "But there are things that when they break never go back to being the same." She was not talking just about the vase. Linda took charge of the outside world. She spoke to the neighbors with a short and dignified version of events, cutting the gossip at the root. "Michael is sick and needed a serious intervention. Arthur was brave. He did what had to be done. The family asks for respect and prayers. The word of a retired judge weighs more than 100 rumors. They force me to eat. Sarah made soups. Linda brought sweet potato pie. But everything tasted like cardboard to me. I felt like I was watching my life from the outside, seeing an old man move through his house like a ghost. The worst were the nights. Going to bed knowing the room next door was empty. I imagined where he would be in a cold cell with strangers. The father in me screamed, calling me a traitor. I had nightmares. I saw him as a child crying behind bars and me unable to reach him. I woke up face-soaked. On the third day, sitting with me on the porch, Linda gave me the hardest medicine. "Arthur, enough," she said bluntly. "Stop torturing yourself. You did not put him there. His decisions put him there. The alcohol put him there. His rage put him there. All you did was open the door so the consequences could enter. And you only did it when your life was in danger. She was right. I knew it. But a father's heart does not understand logic. It beats to the rhythm of a stubborn love, often blind. That same week I took the first step for my own safety. I had always felt safe at home. I almost never locked up during the day. But the phrase "he left with you" are going to regret it, drilled into the back of my mind. I called a company and installed discrete cameras on the porch and an alarm system on doors and windows. The technician taught me to arm and disarm everything with a small panel by the door. The first night I punched in the code and heard the beep confirming the house was protected. I breathed a little better. It was just a detail, but it was mine. My safety no longer depended on anyone's mood. The second step came on advice from Pastor John. He came to see me, brought me a little book of Psalms, and sat with me a good while. "The body heals, Brother Arthur," he told me, "but the soul needs another kind of doctor." He gave me the card of a psychologist, Dr. Simone, specialized in family trauma. I hesitated. In my generation, we did not talk about therapy. We talked to God, to the pastor, to the neighbors. But the world changes, and I needed something else. My first session with Dr. Simone was anything but easy. Her office was a quiet place, with comfortable armchairs and the smell of chamomile. At first I could not speak. Shame choked me. She did not insist. She simply stayed with me in that silence until I started to cry. And after crying, I spoke. 1 hour straight, of my fear, of my guilt, of my love, of my rage. She listened, without judging. For the first time, I felt someone truly heard me. While I started to walk clumsily toward my own healing, Michael started his. Because of the complaint and my testimony, they charged him with assault. His history of scandals did not help. Linda explained that being a first offense of violence, they probably would not lock him up long, but the judge would almost certainly send him to a mandatory rehabilitation program for alcoholism and anger management. And so it was. He spent 3 weeks in jail awaiting the hearing. It was during that time the letter arrived. A white envelope with the return address of the prison, my name written in his handwriting. My hands trembled. I sat in the rocking chair on the porch to read it with the afternoon sun on my shoulders. I opened the envelope slowly. Dad, I do not really know how to start. I suppose sorry is not enough. I have said and done unforgivable things. I know. These 3 weeks in here, sober, with nothing to distract me, have been the longest and clearest of my life. I have had to look at the man I have become, and I did not like what I saw at all. I saw a weak, bitter man who blames everyone for his problems, especially the only one who has always been by his side. I do not remember everything from that night, but I remember enough, and the image of your face, the fear in your eyes, I will never forget. I hate myself for causing you that. When they put the handcuffs on me, I hated you. I blamed you. But here in this silence I have understood. You did not do this to me. You did it for me. You pressed the emergency button because the plane was falling, and I was too busy arguing with the stewardess. You stopped me, and maybe crazy as it sounds, you saved my life. I do not ask you to forgive me. I do not deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand. Thank you for having the courage I did not have. Michael? I read the letter 2-3 times. Tears blurred the lines. They were not just of sadness. There was something of relief, of hope. For the first time in over 2 years, I felt the voice of my true son, not the drunk monster, but the lost man inside. The one who once promised to make his mother and father proud. Still, the road ahead was long. The judge sentenced him to 6 months in a rehab center, inpatient, and a year of probation with mandatory therapy. 6 months seemed like an eternity, but for the first time I saw a light at the end of the tunnel, a long, dark, narrow tunnel, but light at last. In those months I focused on me. I kept going to therapy with Dr. Simone. I went back to the church workshop group. I started inviting Linda for coffee again. Little by little, my house started to feel like home and not prison. The silence stopped scaring me. It became peace. I bought a tablet, one with a big screen. I learned to use it to read, see news, make video calls with Sarah. The world which had shrunk to the walls of my house started to widen again. After the 6 months, a mediator from the rehab center called. Michael had finished the program. He was sober. He was working bagging groceries at a supermarket and lived in a small apartment on the other side of town. He wanted to see me, not at home, not alone, but in a mediation session with a therapist present. My heart shrank, fear, hope, doubts, all at once. Was I ready? Did I want to see him? I looked at the living room, the afternoon sun coming in my plants, the photos. I was at peace. The question I asked myself was, am I willing to risk this peace? That question resonated a whole week. I spoke with Linda. True to her style, she was practical. Whatever you decide, let it be for you, not for him. Seeing him does not mean forgetting. Listening to him does not mean opening the door of the house. I spoke with Dr. Simone. She went to the point. What are you afraid of, Arthur? Of him or of the part of you that wants to forgive everything and pretend nothing happened? Her question pierced me. I did not fear the Michael of now sober and watched by the law. I feared myself, that infinite capacity of a father to erase, justify, minimize. It took me 7 days to decide, and in the end the answer did not come from the head, but from the heart. I had to go, not for him, for me. I needed to see with my own eyes if the change was real. I needed to close that chapter with a period, not with torn pages. The session was on a Tuesday afternoon at a community center near the clinic. A neutral place. I drove myself. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles hurt. I wore a simple cotton shirt and dress pants. I felt like I was going to a funeral. The mediator, Mr. Perez, received me at the door. He took me to a small room with a round table and 3 chairs. There was a pitcher of water and glasses. He told me Michael was on his way. I sat back, straight bag on my lap. I waited. Every second weighed. When the door opened, the man who entered was not the monster of that night, but not the boy in the photos either. He was a stranger. He was thinner without the alcohol bloat. That showed the cheekbones he inherited from Mary, the hair short, the beard trimmed. He wore a simple shirt, ironed, and jeans. But what had changed most were the eyes. They were no longer red, injected with rage. They had a tired clarity, the look of someone who has cried a lot and had to look in the mirror. He stopped in the doorway upon seeing me. He did not smile. He only looked at me with panic and hope mixed. The mediator indicated the chair opposite me. He sat, leaving space. He explained the rules. Respect, do not interrupt. The goal was not to reconcile, but to communicate. Then he gave the floor to him. Michael clasped his hands on the table. They were trembling a little. He looked at his hands. Not me, when he started. Dad, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, not even for you to be here, he said in a low voice. But I asked for this meeting because I had to say it looking at your face. I needed you to hear it from my mouth. He took a breath and looked up. I'm sorry. I am so sorry for the harm I did to you, the fear, the humiliation. I feel every scream, every cruel word, every night I put you through. And I regret, in a way you cannot imagine, having raised my hand against you. There is no excuse. It was not the alcohol, it was me. A weak, bitter, and cruel me. And I am going to spend the rest of my life repenting. Tears ran silent. He did not wipe them. In the program, he continued, they force us to look at the rubble we left behind. And my rubble is you. I almost destroyed you, Dad. And I am sorry fixes nothing, but I wanted you to know that I know what I did. I do not hide any more. The mediator looked at me. Mr. Sullivan, do you want to say something? I looked at him. I looked for falsehood theater. I did not see that. I saw a broken man looking at his own pieces. I believe you, Michael. I said at last. I believe you feel it, and I forgive you. He let out a sob, a sound of relief, so big my soul broke. But I continued, and my voice hardened. Forgiving is not forgetting. And it does not mean going back to before. That Arthur the father who covered everything for you does not exist anymore. You killed him that night. It hurt him. It showed. But I had to say it. I am your father, and I am going to love you always. But now I have to love myself more. Our relationship from today will have limits, clear ones. You have your house. I mine. You your life. I mine. We are not going to live together again. Ever? He nodded without arguing. We can see each other from time to time, have a coffee in a public place. But my house, Michael, my peace, are no longer open to your storm. You have to learn to be your own refuge. Every word weighed, but it was the most honest thing I've ever said. A year has passed. We have been taking baby steps. We kept the agreement. Every 2 weeks we meet at a coffee shop halfway, always at the same table by the window. He orders black coffee, me tea with lemon, and we share a slice of apple pie. We talk about his job, bagging groceries, about my garden, about the weather, of the past little. He continues in therapy. He goes to his Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. He has not touched a drop of alcohol since he got out. Our relationship is not the same. The blind intimacy of father and son is gone, maybe forever. In its place, something new has grown, a cautious respect, a love with borders. It is a sadder relationship, perhaps, but it is safe. And today, for me, safety is worth more than anything. Now, sitting on my porch, feeling the afternoon breeze, I finally feel peace. The house is quiet, but it is a good silence. It is my silence. My son is alive. He is sober. And at his 40-something, he is starting to be the man he should have been at 20. It took a terrible act, an immense pain to get here. I have learned that a father's love does not consist of enduring everything in silence. True love sometimes consists of drawing a line in the sand and saying, I love you, but I love myself more, and you do not cross here. And that sometimes the family you choose to hold you up, a judge neighbor, a sister who crosses half the country, is stronger than the blood that tries to sink you. And what would you have done in my place? Do you think I did the right thing? Tell me in the comments, and tell me what city you are listening from. If this story touched your heart, leave a like so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you for your love. Now on screen you will see other stories that I am sure you are going to like. Click on one to keep listening,